Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into Islamic ethics and specifically how they apply to work, education, leadership, those kind of everyday things.
Yeah, those really practical areas where ethics matter. All the time, right?
Absolutely. And, you've sent over some really interesting sources, and one that caught my eye is Islamic Ethics in Teaching by, let me make sure I get this right, Mehmed A. Hamidovic.
Oh, that's a good one. It really gets into the nuances of how these principles play out.
Yeah, it does. And between that and all the other articles and case studies you sent, it's clear this is a huge topic. So today our mission is to kind of distill it down, find those really surprising and applicable takeaways that our listeners can actually use.
Yeah, I love that because so often with ethics, it can feel kind of abstract.
Totally. So let's jump right in. One thing that struck me going through all this material is that there seem to be these four core principles that just keep popping up, like they're the foundation of everything.
Right. And these are like Tawhid, which is the oneness of God, Al, which is justice, Amana, which is trust, and then Ihsan, which translates to excellence. They're super interconnected, and they really do form the backbone of Islamic ethics.
Okay, so let's break those down a bit, because I think a lot of people hearing those words might have a general idea, but not really how they apply to like showing up at work on Monday.
For sure. So let's start with Tawhid, the oneness of God. Now, this might seem purely theological at first, but it actually has massive implications for how Muslims approach their work. The idea is that every action is ultimately accountable to God. So even something as simple as like attending a meeting or writing a report, if it's done with the right intention and awareness of God's presence, it becomes an act of worship.
So it's like bringing a higher purpose to your daily work. Like it's not just a job, a form of service almost.
Exactly. And that sense of purpose really informs the other three pillars as well. It's not just about being good at your job. These principles are like mandatory for Muslims in professional settings.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, one of the pillars that really jumped out at me was honesty, or sidq. And the sources, they don't just talk about avoiding blatant lies. It seems much deeper than that.
Oh, yeah, it totally is. The Quran, in verse 2.42, it actually forbids mixing truth with falsehood. And that points to a much broader commitment to transparency in all dealings.
So it's about being upfront, honest in all aspects of your work, like how you represent your accomplishments, how you handle finances, no cutting corners, even if you could technically get away with it.
Precisely. And the sources, they use some really powerful imagery to illustrate just how important honesty is. There's this hadith that describes the honest merchant as being in the company of prophets and martyrs.
Wow. I mean, that really elevates honesty, right? Like puts it up there with some of the highest virtues in Islam.
It really does. And this emphasis on integrity, it ties in closely with the principle of justice, or adl, which is another one of those key pillars we were talking about.
Now, when I think of justice at work, I tend to think of like being fair in how you treat people. But the sources, they suggest a much wider application, right?
You got it. It's not just about interpersonal fairness. Islamic ethics, they view justice as having these systemic implications. It's about creating systems and structures that ensure equal opportunity for everyone, no matter their background or beliefs.
So we're talking non-discriminatory hiring, fair wages that actually reflect what people contribute, transparent decision-making, systems for resolving conflicts justly. It's like leveling the playing field.
Exactly. And to see this in action, historically, the rule of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab is often cited as a model of just leadership.
So what was so special about his leadership?
Well, he was known for meticulous management of public funds. He always put the needs of the people first, even above his own. He lived a simple life, even though he was in a position of power, and was super committed to transparency and accountability in all matters.
So he embodied justice, not just in like policies, but in his own behavior too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a reminder that true justice requires a holistic approach, looking at both individual actions and the systems we create.
And speaking of leadership, the sources also really highlight this concept of trust, or amana, as being a crucial element of ethical leadership.
Yeah, amana is super important. It emphasizes the responsibility that comes with any position of authority.
And earlier you mentioned even like regular jobs can be seen as acts of worship. Does that tie into amana too?
Oh, absolutely. The idea is that any role, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is a trust from God. So it's a responsibility that you have to fulfill with integrity and accountability.
So it's not just about doing the job, but doing it to the best of your ability, knowing you're answerable for your actions.
Exactly. But it's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
The sources also emphasize that leaders, organizations, they have a responsibility to create an environment where employees can be trustworthy.
So that means fair systems, clear expectations, things like that.
Right. You can't expect honesty and integrity from people if the system is messed up or there's no transparency.
It's like trying to grow a plant in bad soil. It's not going to thrive.
Exactly. Ethical leadership, it needs to cultivate an environment where trust can flourish and individuals can act with integrity.
Okay, now this brings us to the fourth pillar, Ihsan. We touched on it earlier, but I'm really curious about this one. How does it go beyond just being competent? What does striving for excellence actually look like in Islamic ethics?
Ihsan is about pushing past just being competent and really striving for the best possible outcome in everything you do. It's about constantly improving your skills, refining your approach, and seeking ways to, exceed expectations.
So not settling for good enough, but always aiming to elevate the quality of your work and contributions.
Exactly. And it's this mindset, right? This mindset of excellence that permeates everything, from the small everyday tasks to the biggest projects.
I love that. And it's interesting because you provided all these real-life case studies that bring these principles to life in a very practical way. It'll be so interesting to see how these kind of abstract concepts actually play out in challenging real-world situations.
Oh, yeah. These case studies really show how Islamic ethical principles can be used by individuals and organizations to navigate those tricky situations. They prove these principles are not just theories, but practical tools for making ethical decisions.
I'm really excited to dive into them. But before we do, should we just kind of recap what we've covered so far?
Definitely. So we talked about the 4 pillars of Islamic work ethics: Tawhid, Al-Amana, and Ihsan. We saw how they all connect and create this framework for ethical behavior at work, in school, and in leadership roles. And we also touched on how important it is for leaders to embody these values so they can create environments where people can thrive and reach their full potential.
That's a great summary. Now let's move on to those case studies and see how these principles actually play out in real-world scenarios.
So we'll start with the case of Ahmad, a student at the University of Toronto. He finds himself facing this difficult ethical dilemma during, the stressful exam season.
Okay, so we're talking university life, exams, pressure. It seems like even in a place dedicated to learning and growth, ethical dilemmas can pop up.
Oh, absolutely. So Ahmad, he's under a lot of pressure, right? It's exam time at U of T. The stakes are high. He's worried about grades, what his family expects, the whole deal.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That pressure can really make you do things you wouldn't normally consider. So what happens?
Well, he's online, right? Probably trying to de-stress, I don't know. And he stumbles across what looks like a stolen answer sheet for one of his exams.
Oh, that's a tough one. Knowing it's wrong, what does he do?
Well, the case study really highlights his internal struggle. On one hand, cheating is totally forbidden in Islam, but the temptation is there, staring him in the face.
It's that classic dilemma, right? The easy way out versus your principles.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, his classmate, Li Wei, sees him with the answer key.
Oh, so now someone else is involved. What does Li Wei do? Does he report him?
Li Wei is in a tough spot, too. He's all about academic integrity, but he also doesn't want to, betray Ahmad.
It's a really nuanced situation. Reporting him could have serious consequences, but ignoring it, well, that's not fair either.
Right. So instead of going straight to the authorities or just pretending he didn't see anything, Li Wei decides to talk to their professor, Mrs. El-Khalil. She's known for being wise and understanding Islamic ethics, so he figures she can help.
Smart move. So what does Mrs. El-Khalil do? Does she go straight to the disciplinary route?
What's really interesting is that she doesn't jump to punishment. She gets that students are under a lot of pressure, and she wants to find a solution that's just, but also compassionate.
So she's looking at the bigger picture, not just the rule that was broken.
Exactly. And what she does is really cool. She brings together this group of people. There's Sophia, who's a friend of Ahmad's, and on the student ethics committee, John, another classmate who's known for being fair, and Amina, she's an exchange student. And she brings this whole other cultural perspective.
Wow, so it's this diverse group approaching this situation from all these different angles. What's the goal?
The idea is to create this safe space where Ahmad can explain what happened, why he even considered cheating.
So it's about understanding the root causes, not just pointing fingers.
Exactly. And you know what? Through all this open dialogue, they actually come up with a solution that upholds both accountability and compassion. Ahmad gets to retake the exam honestly, and he gets some help to deal with all the pressure he's under.
So it's restorative, focused on growth, not just punishment. What about the university as a whole? Does this incident have any lasting impact?
Oh, yeah. The case study shows that this whole thing creates a ripple effect of positive change. They revise their academic integrity policies, they make sure there's better support for students who are struggling, they even create this whole ethics office.
Wow, so they're not just enforcing rules, but creating an environment that actually encourages ethical behavior.
Exactly. And it goes even further. They start offering workshops and seminars on academic integrity. Mrs. El-Khalil becomes this sought-after speaker. They even set up mentorship programs so older students can help the younger ones.
So it's a multi-pronged approach, tackling the issue from all sides. What I find really interesting is that it shows how one incident can spark all this positive change, not just for the people involved, but for the whole institution.
And it doesn't even stop there. Ahmad's story, it starts to spread, People are talking about academic integrity at conferences. There are cross-cultural panels with educators from all over the world. It's crazy.
It's like that butterfly effect, right? One little thing can lead to massive change. So this case study really shows how Islamic ethics can be put into practice in an academic setting.
Oh.
You said there are case studies from the corporate world too, right?
Oh, yeah. There's this one about Global Tech Solutions, a multinational company based in New York City. It really dives deep into the whole concept of amana, that trust we were talking about earlier, and how it affects leadership and company culture.
Intriguing. What kind of ethical challenges come up in that setting?
Well, the story focuses on Sarah Johnson, the CFO. She's a recent convert to Islam, and she discovers some shady financial dealings going on within the company.
Ooh, that's a tough spot to be in. Loyalty to your company versus your own ethical principles.
Right. And so she has to make a choice. So she's torn. What should she do? On the one hand, she's got this responsibility to the company, but her faith is telling her something's not right.
It's like a classic conflict of interest, but with this added layer of religious conviction, it must have been incredibly difficult for her.
Oh, absolutely. The case study really emphasizes the weight of that decision. So what she decides to do is call an emergency meeting with the board of directors.
Wow, so she goes straight to the top. Bold move. Who's on the board?
Well, there's John Smith, the CEO, and Michael and Graham, the COO. They're the main players.
Okay, and how do they react to Sarah's concerns? Are they receptive?
Not initially. John and Michael, they're more worried about the company's image, the potential damage if this all goes public.
That's understandable. I mean, no company wants a scandal.
Right. But Sarah, she's not backing down. She's sticking to her principles. She presents her findings very clearly, factually, and she keeps emphasizing that they have to address this ethically, no matter the consequences.
So it's a clash of values, short-term gain versus long-term ethical integrity.
Exactly. But in the end, Sarah's commitment to amana, to that concept of trust and responsibility, it wins them over. They agree to a full investigation.
It's amazing how one person's conviction can make such a difference.
It really shows the power of standing up for what you believe in, even when it's hard.
So what does the investigation uncover?
Well, it turns out one of the senior managers, Alex Reed, has been cooking the books. Embezzling funds, covering his tracks, a real mess.
A classic corporate scandal. How does Global Tech handle this?
Sarah takes the lead, guided by her Islamic ethics. She immediately brings in external auditors for a thorough review and implements stricter financial controls to prevent this from happening again.
Damage control, but also making sure it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. But she realizes that's not enough. They need to rebuild trust. So she works with the company to create this whole ethical code of conduct, emphasizing transparency and accountability at every level.
So it's about creating a culture of ethics, not just punishing the bad apple.
Right. And they implement mandatory ethics training for all employees. Everyone needs to be on the same page.
Well, they're really taking this seriously. But I bet there are still consequences, right? You can't just erase a scandal.
Unfortunately, no. The case study doesn't sugarcoat it. They do suffer financial losses, their reputation takes a hit, and they even lose some clients.
It shows that ethical breaches have real-world consequences, not just for the individual, but for everyone involved.
Definitely. And it takes time to rebuild that trust. There's a period of, uncertainty, disillusionment, even after the immediate crisis is over.
This case study is a powerful reminder of how crucial trust is in a corporate environment. And it shows how Islamic ethical principles can provide a roadmap for navigating these incredibly complex situations.
It really underscores that ethical leadership isn't just about words, it's about actions, especially when things get tough.
So we've talked about ethics in education and in the corporate world. Now, I'd love to circle back to the concept of Ihsan, excellence. We touched on it earlier, but I think it deserves a deeper dive.
Agreed. It's such a rich concept, and it has so much to offer in terms of how we approach our work and our lives.
Exactly. So let's look at a case study that specifically focuses on Ihsan and its role in achieving both individual and collective success.
Great idea. This next one takes us into the world of architecture and design. It's about a firm tasked with creating something truly special.
Oh, I love architecture. Tell me more. What kind of project are we talking about?
It's Skyline Designs, an architectural firm based in Toronto. They've been commissioned to design this state-of-the-art cultural center, a real landmark project for the city.
Sounds like a dream project, but I'm sure there are challenges along the way.
Oh, definitely. The design itself is super complex, pushing boundaries, plus they've got a tight budget and a demanding timeline. And then, just weeks before construction is supposed to start, they discover this major structural problem.
Uh-oh. That's a huge setback. A faulty foundation can ruin everything.
Right, and this is where Ihsan comes in. The lead architect, Aisha Khan, she's known for her commitment to excellence. She rallies her team.
Who's on the team?
You've got David, the civil engineer, a master problem solver. Fatima, the interior designer with this amazing eye for detail. Liam, the project manager, keeping everything on track. Then there's Nina, a junior architect, eager to learn, and Jamal, their contractor, known for his quality work.
So they've got all the bases covered. How do they tackle this crisis?
Instead of freaking out or pointing fingers, they embody Ihsan. David, the engineer, he stays calm, analyzes the problem meticulously, and explores every possible solution. He's the definition of Ihsan in action, committed to finding the absolute best outcome.
It's amazing how he can stay so focused under pressure. What about the others? How do they contribute?
Liam, the project manager, he makes sure everyone's informed and involved. He knows that transparency and communication are key to building trust and collaboration.
Especially in a crisis, it's easy to get siloed, but they're choosing to work together.
And Fatima, the designer, she's all about creativity and adapting. She reworks the interior plans to fit the new structural changes, making sure the design still looks amazing.
So they're turning this obstacle into an opportunity to show their commitment to excellence. What about Nina, the junior architect?
Even Nina gets real responsibility. She oversees the changes to the construction plans. It shows that Skyline Designs is committed to developing talent, empowering everyone to do their best, even when things are tough.
It's a reminder that Ihsan isn't just individual. It's about fostering a culture where everyone can grow. What about Jamal, the contractor? How does he handle these changes?
Jamal and his team, they really embody Ihsan. They go above and beyond to make sure the project is top-notch. Extra hours, adjusting their methods, they're all over it.
It's like they take personal pride in their work, not just fulfilling the contract.
Exactly. And the case study shows that their dedication pays off. The cultural center is finished on time, within budget, and it's not just structurally sound, it's beautiful, functional, everything they envisioned.
A true testament to the power of Ihsan. Their commitment to excellence led to something amazing. But the case study also shows what could have happened if they hadn't embraced Ihsan.
Oh yeah, it makes it clear that without that shared commitment, the project could have been a disaster. Cost overruns, missed deadlines, a compromised design, maybe even total failure.
It's a good reminder that Ihsan isn't just about being nice. It's about achieving the best possible results, no matter what.
And the Skyline Designs case, it shows how Ihsan can turn challenges into opportunities for growth and success. It's about pushing past limits, innovating, never settling.
So we've explored Islamic ethics in education, in business, in creative fields. We've seen how Tawhid, Adl, Amana, and Ihsan can be applied in real-world situations. What stands out to you?
What's really striking is how these principles, they're not just Islamic. They resonate with this universal desire for meaning, purpose, and ethical conduct. It's something we all share, this desire to live and work with integrity.
Beautifully said. It's been an enlightening conversation, and I hope our listeners feel inspired to apply these principles in their own lives.
As you think about all of this, ask yourself, where in your work, your life, could you use a bit more Ihsan? Could you be more transparent? Could you push for a more just system at work? Could you approach your tasks with a deeper commitment to excellence? The key is to take these principles and make them your own.
What a great takeaway. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Islamic ethics. And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving for excellence in everything you do.